Hello and welcome to the C Team. I'm your host, Mike.
And this is Frank.
And today, our 5th episode. Yay, we made it to 5.
Yay.
Great anniversary.
So I guess we're on schedule, maybe.
Yeah, so we're going to remake the first one. That's what we're doing. We're going to do it line for line.
Yes.
No, we're not doing that.
I'm going to do it in a Birmingham accent.
I'm going to go for Scottish and then go into Irish and drunkenly segue into Russian. Anyway, what we're actually talking about, speaking of remakes, see, masterful segue there, video game remakes, because, as I'm sure you're aware, Metroid Samus Returns was released last week. It's a remake of Metroid 2, The Return of Samus.
Actually, there is no the.
Oh, it's just Return of Samus. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've been calling it the wrong thing for years then.
They fixed it in this version as just Samus Returns. This will be right before Samus Forever, and hopefully not Samus and Robin.
Yeah, that would be weird.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we're talking about video game remakes. And before we get into Metroid itself, just, the concept of video game remakes. Yeah. I guess it's video games and movies, and now TV shows are getting more remakes. It's not something you do with music for the most part, unless you count covers.
Yeah.
But what makes a game ripe for a remake? What do you think, Frank?
Well, for myself, yeah, I believe it's when you want to experience the story of the game but don't want to go through like an NES interface.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of games you have, there is a story or good ideas in there, but the technology is just not there to support it. Also, there's the issue, a lot of games, it's hard to find an NES. I mean, okay, there's emulators and stuff, but even, like you're saying, the older games are a little harder to get into now, so bringing something back, making it more accessible on current hardware with, like, improvements, I think that's kind of what... If a game feels like it was in the wrong era, I guess.
The PC has good old games and a few other things that create a good front end for old DOS games and make it easier to play. And it's pretty simple to do on a PC from what I've seen. Emulation for consoles can be hit or miss. And let's see, the last price I saw on Fire Emblem for the Game Boy Advanced is $300.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Old games, there's two types of old games. There's old games that nobody really wants, which are cheap, but you don't want them. And the old games that everybody really wants, which are expensive and you can't get them. And if you do get them, you don't want to take them out of the box because then every time you do that, a collector loses his wings or something.
Yeah, and generally, if the game itself is bad and it had a good concept, I think it's worth trying again.
There's got to be a market for it there. So it's you don't really see a lot of bad games getting remade. You might see a new game with similar mechanics, but if it's a bad game, no one's sitting there thinking, let's make this again.
Yeah, which I feel is a shame. But we'll get onto that more later. So let's start with the most recent remake, Metroid. She's finally back from vacation after...
She got a tan, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's looking good.
Yeah.
Originally, Metroid 2, The Return of Samus. It's a game that is kind of an early dark horse in the series where it was different. It actually brought a lot to the series that is now iconic. Things like the giant shoulders on the Varia suit were done because the color palette on the Game Boy, in the original NES game, the difference in the suits was the color. You couldn't do that on the Game Boy, so they had to redesign the suit as a visual tip-off that you'd gotten an upgrade. And that's become her, iconic look.
Yeah, and also introduce a few things that you don't really see all that often in the series, like, the varieties of the Metroids. Where you see... I mean, you see the squid things, but that's about it for the most part, unless it's the final boss.
Yeah, the later games in the series, for the most part, it's just the floating blob with the teeth, and that's it, except for Other M, which brings back some of them.
So yeah, this is it's a remake of a first generation ish Game Boy. So obviously they've expanded a bit. There's another final boss right at the end. I'm not going to spoil it, but any longtime fans will probably guess who it is. Adding a lot more powers to Spider Ball from the Prime games was in there, and can actually go up most surfaces.
Yeah, in the 2D games, I think the Spider Ball could do that. It's only the 3D games because it would be really broken in the 3D games if you could go up every surface.
Yeah, hide from a boss and just
just bomb them from up there.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. One of the interesting things about Metroid: Samus Returns is it comes on the heels of a well-known, publicized fan remake, AM2R, another Metroid 2 remake. Which they call it another, but it's the only one that actually got finished.
See, a lot of them were started, and at the time, it was there were already like a dozen of them got started, and it was just he very sarcastically just called it another Metroid 2 remake, and then he was the only one left. In fact, the only one to really complete it.
Yeah, and it's by all accounts it's a good game, and it came out, and then Nintendo dropped the cease and desist hammer on it.
It is interesting that they waited because you didn't keep it a secret.
Yeah, this was all over the place. You know, I had really no interest in it, but I still knew it was coming out and being developed. So it is interesting that Nintendo could have sent a cease and desist years ago, and they've made a habit of doing that with other games. So it's odd a little bit that they list this one come to completion and be released before the C&D came out, because now it's out on the internet. You know, it's not on the official site anymore, but you can find it.
Yeah, look hard enough, and you can find it. And, there are already copies made, and, it'll spread.
You can't stop the signal, Mal.
No, you can't. Except for maybe a katana.
Even then.
Yeah.
So it's... So the official remake was announced and released in pretty short order. It was only announced a couple months ago, so I was actually surprised that it came out. I figured it was going to be a holiday thing at least.
The game itself, I played through it over the course of a week.
It's not a big game.
Yeah, it's 17 hours it took me, and it's a nice return to form. Like there's a prologue set of the Federation just going, these things, screw these things, we need them exterminated. And Sam was like, okay.
Yeah, every other game, the Federation is trying to like mine and farm Metroids. This is the one where they're like, no, look, this is way too much trouble. Yeah. This is way more trouble than it's worth. Let's just kill those things. Which turns out to later be even more trouble.
Yeah,
as it turns out.
Well, they didn't really start farming it, and I guess the idea came ahead when Samus brought the Metroid to the Federation alive. And they're discovering new tech for it, and then Super Metroid.
It's where it becomes basically the Aliens later series, where the humans always want to harvest the aliens, even though they kill everything. And there's a little bit of that in Metroid, fitting because Ridley is named for Ridley Scott.
Yeah,
and part of the reason Samus is a woman is because of Ripley.
Yeah, and honestly, it didn't really become a bad plot point for the Federation until Fusion. That's the only time it was really an antagonistic,
Yeah,
goal.
Metroid kind of goes back and forth where sometimes the Federation's all good and sometimes they're shady as hell.
Yeah, I just love in Metroid Prime 3, they realized that the suit they fitted Samus in was a problem, and they didn't try to hide. They were just like, yeah, we actually endangered your life. Sorry.
Yeah, our bad. Sorry about that. Oh, best of luck.
And I just see Samus just like throwing up his hands like, gee, you think?
Yeah. So the Metroid to Return of Samus, or Samus Returns, I should say. Good remake then?
Yes, very good, very good. Just, straight to the point, everything, most of what you want in a Metroid game, and adds a little bit extra at the end. Not terribly consequential, but they're nice to have.
And it hits a couple of the points we were talking about before. It was, Metroid's a great ambitious concept, maybe not something the Game Boy is equipped to handle.
Nope.
And it's not something that's been remade in the meantime, except for AM2R. So now it's kind of a prime time, if you'll excuse the pun, to bring it back where you have, the 3DS, you can make a more robust game with it and do new things with it.
Yeah, so it's expansion of the concept, and what I kind of like about it is, you have one objective: exterminate all the Metroids, and you have like a counter at the bottom. So
Yes.
it's not like you're going down a straight line and just a checklist comes up every once in a while. Oh, you did this thing. Go do the other thing now.
Right.
And yeah, and this isn't the only remake. Fans probably know about this one. Zero Mission, which is a much needed remake of the first game.
Yeah, the first game.
Yeah.
I like the Metroid series, but the first game falls squarely into the great concept technology is not there department.
Yeah.
Because, good lord, that game needed a map.
Yes.
It needed something, because there was a lot of corners cut in that game to make it as big as it was. For one thing, they reused a lot of the environments. There's a lot of samey looking stuff, a lot of infinite loops if you fell, where it was a very difficult game to navigate, even with the map they gave you in the instruction book. So that's a game where Super Metroid is kind of a remake of it. It takes, a lot of the same territory, but the original game needed a map.
Yes.
That's above all else. It needed a damn map.
So yeah, and Zero Mission. If you want to experience the first game, play Zero Mission. I like to keep the original Metroid as just a happy childhood memory that maybe I don't necessarily need to revisit. But here's the weird part for me personally. I actually played Zero Mission before I played through Super Metroid, and it kind of shoots itself in the foot about Zero Mission, for the fact that, in a way, Super Metroid was already it was same planet, same areas for the most part. A couple of additional areas, but Super Metroid was an expanded version of the original Metroid.
It really was. They reused a lot of the layout. I mean, the opening stage of Super Metroid is you going through the final stage of Metroid backwards. And then you end up in a lot of these same, tile for tile remade stages from Metroid. I mean, there's some extra areas, and it's expanded what you can do and where you can go. But in a lot of ways, yeah, like I said, it is in a lot of ways a remake of the original Metroid, which is not a bad thing.
Right. So with Super Metroid already there, Zero Mission, I don't want to call it obsolete, but it's
kind of hitting a lot of the same ground that Super Metroid, which is a lot of people consider one of the greatest games ever made, already did spectacularly well.
So it kind of feels like super-ish Metroid.
Yeah, it kind of is. It's like a midpoint between the original Metroid and Super Metroid, where it brings a lot of the things that Super Metroid brought in, such as the save stations, super missiles.
That's another thing the original Metroid needed.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Oh god, the password, Narpa Sword and Justin Bailey.
Yeah,
and there's one other password I can't really repeat here. It screws you over. It's kind of funny.
Oh yeah, isn't that when everything just turns into glitch?
I forget exactly what it does, but anyway.
So
moving on.
So right. One last thing. Zero Mission, it didn't really. It almost felt like something that maybe, wasn't really necessary.
Well, I think it was necessary in the sense that you needed Metroid with a map, but on the same time, like you said, it retreads a lot of the ground that Super Metroid already did. And it's not the only remake that Nintendo's got coming out.
Another one that they announced months before it came out, Fire Emblem Echoes: Shadows of Valentia. Now, Fire Emblem did not actually come out until in the West until the Game Boy Advance, but it is a much older series than that. In the Famicom, basically their NES, and Samus Returns and even Link to the Past, it was a very experimental stage in the series.
You mean Link's Adventure?
Yes, that's what I meant. Adventures of Link, actually. Not to nitpick, but.
Moving on.
But yeah, it introduces a lot of things that. First of all, Fire Emblem, for those who don't know, is a tactical, RPG. You have a grid, grid map. It's strategy RPG is what word I'm looking for, and usually you're going straight forward from one chapter to the next, and they have their units. You strategize.
It's a strategy RPG. People know how a strategy RPG works.
Fine. And usually the enemies are humans, except for maybe like a final boss. This introduces, first of all, a map, an overworld map where you can get into other encounters besides the main story bits. There are also no weapon degradation, and there are also other monster units besides a final boss. And as far as these things go, the second game in an NES series, some things stayed and some things didn't. Like, monsters weren't really revisited until the 8th game.
Yeah, that was an odd pattern for like a lot of NES games where you had the original game, which everybody loves, a second game which does something totally different, and then like usually around the SNES, or in Mario's case, the next Nintendo game, the next NES game, they kind of step back, take a couple elements from the second game, but for the most part, it's almost a remake of the first game.
So yeah, Shadows of Valencia, it's another much needed remake, and it's completely fresh for me because I've never played the second game because it's a lot to translate a Japanese game to an emulator, and
so it's inaccessible otherwise.
Yeah, inaccessible otherwise, and I've seen Let's Plays, and even in English, the interface there's not much to it.
The Nintendo Entertainment System had 2 buttons.
Yeah,
it was not really great for anything complex. It was great for Mario and Zelda at the time, but anything that required more than like 2 functions, it was a little rough.
Yeah, but there are things in Shadows of Valencia that I hope the rest of Fire Emblem will learn from. They basically they add a few characters, a few villains, and actually some very well written villains. And it was a much tighter story as well than, say, like Fates. And the writing is better, but I can complain about Fates on another episode. But
yeah, we'll do a Fire Emblem episode at some point probably.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a very good game, and I highly recommend it.
It's already out?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's been out for a while.
Okay.
I inhaled that game.
Oh, you do that a lot. You beat games much quicker than I do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that, like I said, that's a weird pattern with Nintendo's early franchises, and that's why I think maybe the next one should be Link's Adventure.
Yes,
because they've remade and re-released the original game. And it would be interesting to see a remake of that style. Like, it's almost Zelda closer to a traditional RPG with the world map and random encounters. And interesting to see that world in a 3D, a modern remake. I think that would be an interesting way to revisit it because it's such a different Zelda game than the others.
Well, I think the biggest thing holding it back is I feel of all the gameplay mechanics video games have learned to use over the years, melee was always the hardest to really get down right.
Yeah, guns are easy. You shoot little bullets out. The melee is a little tougher, and Zelda has come a long way. And Zelda 64, Ocarina of Time, probably did the most for the industry and the genre and the medium as a whole for nailing down how combat should work, especially in a 3D sense.
Right, and even in 2D, Zelda 2, it tried. It definitely tried very hard to make melee interesting, but the enemies just came across as cheap. And
yeah, it was tough to do. They made a fine effort. You can find all the different techniques, kind of like Wind Waker in that respect. And I feel like that is one where different games have brought in different elements of it. Like Ocarina of Time had like the different villages. Skyward Sword has that definitely to an extent. The magic spells were definitely something brought in Ocarina of Time. The more I'm thinking about it, I think Ocarina of Time was the Zelda 2 remake that I'm looking for.
Yeah,
Because it brought back a lot of the elements of it. But I would just like to see also just the world of that timeline, because Zelda has, of course, the 3 timelines, and it would be interesting to see that section of the world, that time of the world after Ganon, and how the world is getting on at that point.
yeah. We've had Link Between Worlds, which does put in 3D, but still very much the style of
Link to the Past.
Link to the Past. So yeah, that's definitely one I would go for. Who knows? Maybe they'll announce it'll be out in 2 months.
Yeah, that would be nice. I like when Nintendo does that. Here's a game. Oh, we're not waiting 3 years for it. It's now.
Yeah.
Give me your money.
Just to let you know, we weren't just sitting on Metroid for the last few years. We actually did some work.
Yeah, actually, they were mostly sitting on Skyward Sword. That's the one they put all their effort into.
Yeah.
Okay, so what other remakes, remasters? A lot of games these days are just being re-released with some touch-ups on Steam or on Virtual Console, or I don't know if Xbox Live Arcade is still a thing, but you're seeing a lot of games being brought back. Maybe not with the extent of a Samus Returns remake, but things that are being brought back and touched up and given some of the benefits of modern technology.
Yeah, and ask me 2 years ago what game I would have wanted re-released. Not even like a full remake, but something with more control improvements. It would have been Turok 2.
So Turok 2, the remakes you've been playing on the computer.
Yes.
Is this through Steam or
yes?
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it also through Good Old Games and all the other sites.
Right. So, but it brings in. Is it now a traditional computer FPS controls?
Basically.
Whereas in the original, Turok was of course on the N64, which had a unique controller made for somebody with 3 hands.
Yeah.
And it was a good game. We had fun with it. But, it doesn't have the same kind of precision or maneuverability of the keyboard and mouse for FPSs.
Well, it's not even that. Like, I've played plenty of FPSs, with the controller. I've never really had a problem with that. The thing about Turok 2 is it always felt a bit stiff. Like, movements happened slightly too long between, a little too far after you've already pressed the button.
Mm-hmm. So there's like a lag, a delay.
Yeah, there was always a bit of delay, especially when you have more than 2 or 3 monsters in front of you. And another thing is, okay, write in the comments, am I the only one who had trouble with controller packs?
Yeah, those were always a pain. I think the games that held up the best were the ones that was just like, okay, save it on the cartridge. GoldenEye, we still have all our saves, all the cheats that we game sharked into there. I can put in Ocarina of Time to probably still go back to my old save, but the memory card for the N64 was just terrible,
yeah.
Totally terrible.
All the time I spent on WWF games where you create a wrestler.
Oh, that was
all gone.
Not that we were playing those games all that much to start with in the last decade and a half.
Yeah, but still,
yeah, you don't like to lose it. I was one of those guys. I mourned when the battery died on my Pokemon games.
Yeah, I still haven't looked at it, and I don't want to.
Yeah, we don't want to know what's in there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so in that respect, the whole the hard drives on modern games is just a better way to go about it.
Yes. So Night Dive, by the way, Night Dive, you guys are awesome. They were re-released both, Turok 1 and Turok 2. And, they basically just, fixed all the problems I had. The saving system where that works.
Yeah, and controls adapted to just a better control scheme than the N64 controller.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look back on Turok 2, and I kind of feel I bring this up specifically because I think action games can learn a few things.
Looking back at how their elders once did it.
Yeah,
Turok sitting there we had to go up Hill toot both ways.
Back in my day, we had a map, and we were always lost because of it.
We didn't have any of this health regeneration. We had to find a medipack, and we liked it.
We had to take claws and cut a dinosaur's head off.
I think they still do that.
Well, yeah.
There's always the desperation attack.
Yeah. And I know this is really not in style nowadays, but I kind of miss mission objectives.
They're still there. It's just broken up into side quests now, mostly.
Well, I mean, in an action game, like in GoldenEye, you had to do other things besides kill everyone.
I think they're still there. The Fall and War for Cybertron games had those to an extent. I mean, it still amounted to kill everybody on your way to the objective, but you would win. It wasn't just get from one end of the stage to the other and kill everything. I think there are still mission objectives, especially in your wartime style games like COD, Medal of Honor. I think that's still there.
Yeah, well, from what I understand, a lot of them are very linear, basically just from one shooting gallery to the next.
Well, some of them are, no doubt, but others maybe not so much.
But I mean, you can get easily lost in Turok 2. Like, I do recommend the game, but keep that in mind.
My experience with the game was like 90% getting lost.
Yeah, but surely we could find a middle ground. Is what I'm saying. Have objectives that you actually have to find, but make the level design
intuitive.
More intuitive.
Part of it was Turok was taking place in like alien spaceships and bug hives and stuff. So like not necessarily something like, oh, I need the keys to the computer. Okay, there's the I know the layout of an office building, so here's a computer room, or or here's where it makes sense to put these things. It's okay. They're alien bugs. They'll put it wherever the hell they want.
And kill enough of them, they'll probably drop it. But
yeah, that too. That's always the good part. That's what these games teach you. If you need something, kill enough people until they drop it.
And one thing that kind of surprised me about Turok 2 is you can basically stealth kill enemies. This is mostly possible with like the upgrade of like the the wrist blades that you get. But there were plenty of times when I could actually sneak up on the enemy. He'll notice me, but not until I'm like right next to them. He'll turn around and you can go for a headshot with the claws.
And that does kill most things if you claw them in the head.
And this isn't a canned animation or anything like that. It's basically you just swinging the thing, and sometimes I hit the shoulders, but they react to that.
Yeah, so it's not like a canned stealth kill like in a lot of games like the Two Thrones, Prince of Persia,
right,
or what's another game I was playing recently that had those, or even a stock thing like in Skyward Sword, not Skyward Sword,
the other one,
Breath of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, so there is some merit to that, where it was kind of doing a thing that other games put in a lot of fanfare, but it was just something you could do.
Yeah, it wasn't really advertised, and it's just, that was a fun part of me. I wasn't getting hit. I was keeping him, on the balls of his feet, but it was a fight. Actually, like kind of felt like a fight. And stealth kill is like press the button. All right, you're good. Yeah,
a lot of things in games now are kind of like canned set pieces. Like in God of War, you hit circle the FU button, and you get the canned animation, which it works for that. But there is some merit to like having like an actual brawl to it. That's something Red Steel 2 kind of does. There are a handful of canned animations, but it plays like a real fight for the most part.
And another thing that surprises me are the death animations really hold up. Like, this is before ragdolls. This is before anything like that. And, it didn't feel like the robotic movements that we were used to at that time.
Yeah, it looked and felt as natural as you can get with rampaging dinosaur creatures.
Right, and, and yes, it's still a little blocky, but, not as much as they used to be. And, when you blow something's head off, sometimes their body will flail about. It won't just kill over and just die.
It looks like somebody who just got his arm blown off and he's panicking because he's bleeding out.
Yeah,
it makes logical sense. And there's a lot that Turok 2 did pretty well, and that's why it's a game that's worth remaking or remastering.
Yeah, and despite the bad controls and a controller pack that hated you, the animation always just kind of brought me back. It's very comic bookish. Just the way the creatures move, and you have this one, this cyborg. You have this one cyborg creature that has his leg is just one wheel, and he's like guiding himself with his arms, and it looks very natural. It looks very, despite being a robot, it looks
like something that actually would move that way.
Yeah, and it's. I want to bring it to some light because I feel it's an unfortunately overlooked game. I mean, not as much since they re-released it.
I don't know if it's overlooked. It was one of the killer apps back in the N64 days.
Yeah. Some have called it the best third-party effort.
I would put that at GoldenEye, or was Rare a second party at that point?
I think they were mostly second party.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I think Ocarina of Time is the better constructed game, but a game of this nature, I always held Turok 2 above all else. And if you got a Steam account, I can't recommend it enough.
Okay, so let's talk about some other remakes that we've seen or enjoyed. One of my personal favorite remakes, partly because I never really played the original, the Resident Evil remake. That one was another big deal. That was kind of on the scale of Samus Returns, where it was like from the ground up rebuilt and even rearranged. So if you had played the original, there were places that it played that against you, where, if you played the original and you're expecting, oh, this is a safe hallway, dogs would jump in the window. And I really liked that it was just like, and the original Resident Evil, a lot of its appeal is the B-movie cheese factor.
Yes.
And it's kind of unavoidable with Resident Evil as a whole, but the remake is just much easier to take seriously as a game. It's just better constructed. The acting is better. The storyline is told in a no-nonsense way. And it's just a really good game. And it retains a lot of the difficulty of the original game with the limited ammo and the very tough zombies. It's still a game where, Resident Evil 2, you can kill every zombie in that entire game and still finish with hundreds of rounds of ammo. The original Resident Evil, you are better off running from most of them.
Yeah.
And I just like it as a game. It's very creepy. It's very atmospheric. There are a few jump scares, but for the most part, it is just a well put together game. And I think it's probably of that style of Resident Evil game, it's probably the best one, the remake.
Yeah. And I guess another point to bring up with that, when you do a remake, you should never just do the same exact thing. I mean, it's with better technology, it's easy not to do that in a way, but bring new levels.
Yeah, new levels trick your old players. That's something that the Final Fantasy IV for DS remake did. The original Final Fantasy IV on the SNES, I blew through it in about 15 hours. It was easy. It was easy because they changed a lot of things coming over from Japan to the US. When they remade it for the DS, they made this thing tough as hell. Like, you had to grind, you had to take out a lot of tricks, and the tricks that worked in the original, you got punished for in the remake. There was one boss in the original that you could cheese to death with the jumping, with Kane's jump. You try that in the remake, it slaughters you on the next turn. So it was an interesting game where it was a remake made not just for the fans, but kind of with the fan strategies in mind. So that was an interesting way to go about it. And it's kind of...
So it sounds like a bit of a jerk.
It is. It's one of the few Final Fantasy games I had to grind up to level 80 to have a chance. And it's not an easy game, but there's a lot you can do with it. It kind of did revamp some of the system where you could give people other characters' abilities. So there was a lot to it in the remake. They've remade Final Fantasy IV 3 or 4 times. I think the DS remake is probably the best. But, that's kind of another one that's just, it's a big remake, like Samus Returns.
Yeah. And let's move on to upcoming.
Yeah. What do we got coming down that we know of?
Well, the only one I'm really aware of at the moment, for all I know, Nintendo's going to release, another remake tomorrow, but
They could. They
Yeah.
do that kind of thing.
yeah. So Final Fantasy VII. See,
Oh, the big one. This is the big remake. People, 20 years we've been asking for this remake.
yeah. Mike is more of a fan of Final Fantasy than I am. So what do you know what the status is?
Well, I've seen footage of it. They are working on it. I have not heard anything specifically recently. I believe it's going to come, for the modern consoles, PlayStation 4, Xbox One X, whatever they're doing now.
45.
But the biggest, like many people, this was like the first RPG I ever played. So it has a special place in my heart. And I even replayed it a couple years ago. And I don't usually replay RPGs because they're so big.
Yeah.
Now, my biggest issue with Final Fantasy VII as a remake is them making it episodic. They've claimed that each episode is going to be the size of like a regular Final Fantasy game, which I don't know.
So which is kind of bizarre to me because with that same effort, you would just kind of make several Final Fantasy games.
You'd think, but I would be interested to see how they break it up. Like, I could see them doing, okay, the first episode is till you get out of Midgar. Second episode is until the end of Disc 1. Like, I don't think they should break it up into more than 3 or 4 episodes tops. Because episodic games, there is a problem with episodic games, which is that the episodes stop.
Yeah.
I have it down on my sheet as the Half-Life 2 problem.
Yes.
Half-Life 2, Episode 1 came out, Episode 2 came out, and they said they were going to do episodes so they could keep feeding it content between then and Half-Life 3, and that was like a decade ago, maybe?
Yeah, I kind of find it bizarre that Valve hasn't made Half-Life 3 yet.
They seem allergic to the number 3. Because Half-Life 2, Team Fortress 2, Left 4 Dead 2, I think what happened was, well, one thing I've heard is that the way Half-Life 2 Episode 2 ends depressed the writer so much that he couldn't really think of the next part. So at this point, I'm calling it, they've quietly abandoned it. It's never coming out.
Well, the difference between Half-Life 2 and, say, Portal 2 and T-Fortress 2. T-Fortress 2 is, kind of just a standalone, no real plot, multiplayer shooter. Portal 2 wrapped up any loose plot threads.
I know that's just the joke. They stop at 2. They don't know. Yeah. Like there's no third floor at Valve HQ. Yeah. Stuff like that.
Just in case.
But so that's my worry as far as Final Fantasy VII as an episodic game goes. The first episode is going to sell like mad, and I think the second episode is going to drop off a little bit from that, and then the third, if there's a third, will drop off even more, and it's hard to maintain interest over that. And I worry that they're going to start on this really ambitious remake and not finish it. I would rather have one product that's finished than 3 episodes out of 5. Yeah. Like, on a slight tangent here, this is Overclock Remix did something similar. They usually, if they do a remix album of a game, they release it all in one go. They released Final Fantasy IV all in one shot, 7, 6... 9, and for Final Fantasy V, they decided to do it in discs, and it took like 4 years for the second disc to come out when it was supposed to come out like on a quarterly basis. Yeah. So that's what I worry. I would rather that Square just make one Final Fantasy VII remake and release that than possibly come out with 3 episodes and then drop off the face.
Yeah. So. And while we're on the topic, let's see, like what kind of remakes do we want? Like, and there's more than one reason. Like, it could be a good game that you want to update. It could be a bad game that you want people to try again. And other than Fire Emblem, with Echoes out, I hope Echoes becomes like a little mini thing, with remakes, just so I can play the rest of the stuff that they haven't released here yet. And See, in the 90s, I had kind of a guilty pleasure.
Oh boy.
Yeah, he knows
where
what
he's going with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't judge me for this.
I'm judging you for this.
The Army Men series.
Boo.
Whatever. See, here's the thing. Hear me out. I think it's an interesting concept, especially what they did in the one, real-time strategy game they came out with, which most people will say was all right. Basically, Army Men, harvesting plastic from other like toys that kids have left lying around, and turning them into soldiers and weapons and stuff. I think
it's collecting Vespine gas and minerals.
Right, but to me that's still an interesting concept, and the problem is 3DO just didn't have the ability.
They milked it. There was like a new little crappy Army Men game every other month for a while. It was okay. The concept of Army Men as a thing, okay, but the games were not good.
Well, that's why I want it done by someone who knows what the hell he's doing.
Well, here's the thing: you don't get games that are not well remembered aren't going to get remakes,
which is a shame because some high concepts I feel are worth re-exploring. Maybe it can't be under the Army Men name since it's been tainted, in more ways than one. In more ways one, sorry. But if someone took that concept and actually did something great with it, I think we could have something unique. We could have something that works.
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's worth pursuing personally.
Yeah. Always have to be a downer.
No, just toward Army Men. So what other games do we want to remake? I'm going to go with Final Fantasy V, along similar lines to the DS remake of Final Fantasy IV. Final Fantasy V is one of my favorite games. I replayed it not too long ago. The Game Boy Advance version, which has, I think, the best script. But I would like to see that game, voice acted. I'd like to see all the different jobs in 3D. I heard that they were working on it, but it was a graphical thing, probably with all the different jobs and animations. But I wish they would come out with it.
See, here's the thing. In the 3DS, there's also a title, Bravely Default, which uses a very similar, it's basically the same thing, only heavily expanded, version of the, job system. And, and there is kind of there's sort of different costumes for everyone. They have the male costume and the female costume, those two variants. And they kept the animations simple, where most weapons you're either, swinging down with a sword or, thrusting.
So kind of like Final Fantasy Tactics did.
Basically. And so they've already, in a way, have done that. My biggest problem with Bravely Default is that the characters are absolutely insufferable. And, I wouldn't mind if they did the same thing only with Final Fantasy V's characters, so I cringe less.
I wouldn't want them to expand or change the job system in 5 too much, because it is complex, but it's also got a certain simplicity and charm to it. And I like how I just like how Final Fantasy V works. It's one of my favorite Final Fantasy games.
Well, what Bravely Default does is usually, in Final Fantasy V, you could have an action, from anything but magic. You basically have one action that you can add to a class. In Bravely Default, each class has their own list of abilities, and you put a whole list of abilities, a whole list of magic or knight abilities to, say, a mage.
So that's more like Final Fantasy Tactics again, which was itself an expansion of you got to play Final Fantasy Tactics. Yeah, you got to play Final Fantasy Tactics, man. You would love it.
Yeah, I am getting around to that, though. I'm still working my way through Zelda and Dragon Quest 8 of all things. I still don't know how I got into that game.
Okay, so what else is on our wish list here?
So let's see. Should I start with the impossible task or the ignored task?
Let's go with impossible.
So, Elder Scrolls Arena. See, I know it's an impossible task because the world map is absolutely huge and several cities. And this is back in the 2.5D era.
Yeah, this is mostly sprites.
Yeah, mostly sprites. And Elder Scrolls Online sort of has you explore the whole world, but not in nearly the detail that like Morrowind or any other older Elder Scrolls games have gone into. And yeah, I kind of want a game where you can like travel to all the different provinces again.
Now, why would this be impossible? Because Breath of the Wild has a bigger world than most of the Elder Scrolls games, so it's doable.
Well, it's not. It's less the landmass and more the details. How like there's only like how many cities are there in Breath of the Wild?
Well, six or seven, I think.
In the Elder Scrolls series, each province has at least 6, and
I think it's doable.
NPCs galore. It's something I would like to have, like to be possible, because I kind of want to experience the first hero of that series in a less jerkish interface and everything else that wants to kill you, and no idea how I would even like go about it. I don't even know where I would start, but so yeah, Elder Scrolls Arena, and even Daggerfall actually might be more possible because it does cover a smaller area. Only it's kind of between 2 provinces. I'm kind of hoping for that for the next Elder Scrolls, that you get to visit 2 provinces as opposed to 1.
Yeah, they seem to have segmented them by the area. So yeah, it would be nice to open up the world a bit. Although I think there is the effort, an ongoing effort, when like Skyrim comes out, they put in Morrowind and the Oblivion territory, like modders did.
Yeah, and well, I mean, there is a value to focusing on one area of the world. You have a story that's completely uniquely that area. That's what Morrowind did pretty well. You really didn't care what the Emperor was doing. It was all about Morrowind.
That is an interesting thing, because a lot of RPGs, it will be like the entire world by the end of the game. So it always strikes me as interesting when you have a game like Final Fantasy XII, for instance, only takes place on like one continent. The Last Story takes place mainly on one island in a much larger world that you don't see. So it's interesting to me, to see where you could expand these things.
Yeah, and yeah, that's kind of my point about the Elder Scrolls. So it'll be a quantity versus quality thing, as it always tends to be in these kinds of games. But another game, I'll like remade. It's, if you haven't heard of it, I can't really blame you for it. It's called Ninja 5.0. Which,
are they based in Hawaii?
They don't really specify. Like the first level is just a bank. The one level is just an airport. And so on and so forth.
Hawaii has all those things, and it's near Japan, so ninjas don't have too far to travel from there.
Okay, we'll play it your way. Yes, it takes place in Hawaii.
Ninja Hawaii 5.0.
Yes,
that's all I ever asked for.
Yeah. Oh, they did it that way. Oh, but so Ninja 5.0 is an older, I should say, school style of ninja platformers where you're a lot of exploration, side scrolling, and one cool thing does, you have a grapple hook to swing from one place to another, which sounds finicky, but you get it down, it's really fun to swing around in. And the problem was, Konami didn't develop it, but they did publish it, and I gotta say, they did an absolutely poor job advertising it. Like, I only found it because I was digging for it.
Yeah, it was not like a big advertised game. It just kind of, it came out, and that was it. That was the advertising. The advertising was the box on the shelf.
Yeah, and I tried looking for it the weekend after it came out. Nowhere to be found. Like, it did not sell at all, which is such a shame because it is a very solid, platformer. And but the thing is, I do love the game. It could have been expanded. It could be expanded. You could do so much, with platforming, the concept, and I just wish that game was given more of a chance.
So, before we came in here, we reached out to some of our friends and hopefully listeners. I hope people are listening to this thing to ask, what kind of remakes they would be looking for. So some of these are your friends, Frank. So what were they asking for?
Let's see. I admit some of these I haven't really. I like heard of them, don't really know much about them. Panzer Dragoon Saga.
Okay, that one I know some about. Panzer Dragoon was a kind of a flight sim game on the Saturn where you were on dragons. Panzer Dragoon Saga was the odd duck of the series where it was more of an RPG. The others were like rail shooters. This one was more of an RPG with a more robust story and a different battle system. And it was on the Saturn, so I never got to play it, and neither did a lot of people. And it is one of the few series. It's one of the series that Sega has not really revisited at all. In the meantime, they had a Panzer Dragoon game, I believe, for either the Dreamcast. I think it was for the Dreamcast, but that's it. It's been like 15 years, and really nothing else has come out. So that one, yeah, I could see wanting a remake of that.
Let's see, any Sierra adventure game.
Yeah, adventure games are kind of
sadness generators.
Yeah. So who was actually suggesting these? Want to mention the names?
Okay. Let's see, Lauren. Any Sierra adventure game, and she actually wrote to me. It's like and let's have the staircases have railings this time.
Yeah, that's one of the cheap ways you died in Sierra games.
You died from nothing in those games.
It was all. That's all it was about. It was about cheap, quick deaths. Let's see. I had a friend who's saying Earthbound. That would be Brian Richmond. He wants Earthbound remade along with everybody else, really, because that's one that has has not really come over from Japan. A couple of the games did, and they were weird as hell. And I have a friend who loves using NES in Smash Brothers, but for the most part, it's one of the more neglected Nintendo series. And this was a funny one. A friend of mine, Eric Dante, he wanted A Boy and His Blob to be remade, and then in the course of the conversation, he realized it was remade, and I think he rushed off to get it. So enjoy that one.
Yeah, have fun with that.
A Boy and His Blob was, again, actually, it wasn't one of my favorites growing up. I never really got far in it, but it's one of the few games my mother really loved to play. That and Tetris. She was always playing that. It was like one of the few times like we had to pry her off the NES so we could play something else.
Yeah, and I just want to say Ethan said Panzer Dragoon Saga.
Okay.
Because I didn't write it down here. Let's see. Vinny. Hey, Vinny. Let's see. He recommends the original F-Zero and Chrono Trigger. Yeah, I haven't played much of F-Zero, admittedly.
It's a good, pretty decent racing game. I've played it a few times. That's the thing. Remake of a racing game, it's kind of, isn't that what the sequels are? Because they use a lot of the same tracks, much of the same physics. But I guess if they haven't really, that was one of the SNES games.
Yes.
With the whole Mode 7 thing, which is like the proprietary NES technology. So it would be interesting to see that remade with the higher speed stuff like you have today, like in Wipeout, or I actually don't know that many racing games. I'm sorry.
Well, the thing about Chrono Trigger, I've been playing Dragon Quest VIII, which is has the same artist, good old Dragon Ball Akira Toriyama, and I find the graphics in the 3D and his style of art very fun. And animation, very fun to watch. Yeah, there's a fun little bar fight. The big guy on your squad just lifting a chair and the guy on it.
So you'd like to see similar animation for like a Chrono Trigger remake?
Yeah, I think that would actually be really fun to look at because maybe he only has like 5 faces to his repertoire, but Akira Toriyama, his stuff is always just fun to look at.
Yeah, it's a very distinctive style. It's easily recognizable. And I've seen some, I think one of the re-releases of Chrono Trigger had like anime cutscenes, or it might have been commercials or stuff. And yeah, it would be interesting to see a game like more fleshed out from that.
Yeah. A friend of mine, Mo, says Mega Man. about that.
Yeah. I mean, they've re-released the original games a couple times, and I want to see a new Mega Man game, specifically Mega Man Legends 3. Capcom, you guys are jerks for canceling that.
Yeah.
I'm just laying it out there. I'm not saying anything that anybody doesn't know. And let's see. It was last one I got is friend Liz. She, I guess, wants a Bubble Bobble remake. That was, old puzzle game with a dinosaur that spits bubbles. It was an interesting game. I've played it a few times. Had some interesting combo mechanics. So yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing a remake of that.
And I think it's only fair. I was hesitant to mention this one, but it's only fair that we mention the rest. I'm just going to say the name. Hello, Frank. One called Plumbers Don't Wear Ties.
I am not familiar with that one. That's why I skipped it.
From what I understand, it is not safe for work.
Okay, so
yeah, so I'm not going to get deeper into that.
Okay, so yeah, I guess he wants that one for some reason. More power to you.
Yep.
So where do we stand on remakes? Yay, nay?
Yeah. Especially, again, I absolutely love Fire Emblem Echoes. And, Samus Returns, welcome back, Samus, old buddy. And...
yeah, Samus was kind of getting neglected there for a while.
Yeah.
It felt like, Mario had a new game announced, Zelda came out and won all of the awards. Yeah, like Splatoon was out, like everything was getting... good press, except for poor Samus, because of Other M, and it was just like she was kind of on the ropes, and then they brought her back.
Well, it takes a couple of years to make any kind of game really these days. So it's not like they weren't working on it.
Yeah.
So it's it's great, and I really hope to see more Fire Emblem games that an American like me can play without. Emulators.
You can't just learn Japanese.
After you, buddy.
Konnichiwa. That's what I know. Okay, so I think we've gone around as much as we can on this.
Okay.
So remakes good as long as that's the other thing. They have to still be good games.
Yeah.
If you remake a game and it's crap, then you've gone backwards.
Yes.
So, all right. So I'm Mike Curley,
and this is Frank Curley,
and we're signing off. This has been the C Team.
Ciao.
Check.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, the headphones are up real high. That's why.
Yeah.
Tech.